A baby died, and the death changed Chinese history. The child was only a few months old. Earlier that day, the Empress had visited her. Only two women had been alone with the child. The other was the child's mother, a woman named Wu Zetian, the emperor's favorite concubine. The mother accused the empress of murder. The emperor believed her. The empress lost everything. The mother became the new empress. More than 13 centuries later, historians are still arguing over a simple question. Did the empress kill the baby? Or did Wu Zetian kill her own daughter and frame her rival? Nobody knows. Maybe by the end of this story, you will have your own answer. The mother, Wu Zetian, the only woman who ever ruled China, not as a regent, not as a figurehead, as emperor. But before we get to the throne, we need to start in a monastery with a shaved head and 0 options. The year is 649. The emperor is dead. For most people in the palace, life would go on. For Wu Zetian, it was supposed to end. She had entered the palace at 14, smart, ambitious, and impossible to ignore. The emperor noticed her early and gave her a title, Talented One. But notice wasn't enough. For 12 years, she remained stuck at the same rank. No promotion, no influence, no future. Then the emperor died. The rules were clear. Any concubine who had not borne him a child will leave the palace, shave her head, and spend the rest of her life in a Buddhist monastery. Wu was 25. Her story should have ended there, but she refused to take it. Wu had spent more than a decade inside the palace. She understood something most people didn't. Rules mattered, but powerful people mattered more. The new emperor was Gaozong, the dead emperor's son, and Gaozong had never forgotten her. That alone was dangerous. Taking one of his father's former concubines into his own harem would invite criticism. To many officials, this wasn't just improper, it was morally unthinkable. But attraction has a way of ignoring rules, and ambition has a way of finding opportunities inside them. When Gaozong visited the monastery, he didn't meet a defeated woman accepting her fate. He met Wu Zetian, a woman who knew exactly what returning to the palace could mean. The details are lost to history. We don't know what was said. We only know what happened next. Gaozong wanted her back. And somehow, the biggest obstacle to that plan became its strongest supporter, the Empress herself. At the time, the Empress had a problem of her own. Another concubine was becoming too powerful. She had borne sons, gained influence, and was steadily replacing the Empress in the Emperor's affections. The Empress needed an ally. Wu needed a door back into the palace. Each believed she could use the other. When Wu returned, she did not return as a low-ranking concubine struggling to survive. She returned near to the top of the hierarchy. That alone tells us something. The emperor wasn't rescuing an old memory. He was making a choice. Wu dismantled the favorite concubine in months. She had the emperor's total attention. She gave birth to a son, then another. Every child strengthened her position. Every year made her harder to remove. The woman who had entered the palace as a useful weapon was becoming something much more dangerous. And by the time the Empress realized it, it was already too late. In 654, Wu Zetian gave birth to a little princess, the baby from the story we opened with. The child died shortly after the Empress visited. No one could ever prove who killed the little princess. Many people believed Wu killed her own daughter and framed the Empress. The Empress, on the other hand, had no motive to kill an infant. Even if she felt threatened by Wu, it would have been an absurdly foolish method to use. If Wu really was the killer, why would she need something so extreme? She already had the Emperor's heart. She already had one healthy son. By any normal logic, she was winning. She didn't need a dead daughter to secure her position. Except she wasn't playing for secure. She was playing for total. As long as the Empress held the title, Wu was still officially a concubine, second tier, replaceable. She knew better than to rely on the Emperor's love alone. Love was a feeling. Feelings changed. And she was just one mood swing away from being sent right back to that monastery. And Wu had already lost everything once. She was not interested in almost safe. Maybe the baby's death was murder. Maybe it wasn't. What matters is that Wu understood something immediately. The tragedy had created an opening. Wu intended to use it. More importantly, the emperor believed her. Now Gaozong had a reason to do what he really wanted to do. Remove his wife, make Wu empress. But replacing an empress was one thing, getting the court to accept her was another. And that battle was going to be much harder. The court fought back immediately. Many ministers objected on moral grounds. Wu had once belonged to the late emperor's harem. Others pointed to an old prophecy that a woman named Wu would one day threaten the Tang dynasty. But beneath all these arguments was something much simpler. The ministers did not trust Wu, and they did not want her anywhere near the center of power. For years, men like these had dominated the court. They had served Gaozong's father. They advised him, guided him, and often limited what he could do. The dispute over Wu was becoming something larger than a marriage. It was becoming a test of authority. Could the emperor make his own decision, or would the old ministers make it for him? Wu understood this. She didn't waste time trying to persuade the entire court. The battle could not be won. Instead, she focused on the one person who mattered, the emperor. And in the end, Gaozong made his choice. Not simply because he loved her, but because supporting Wu also meant asserting his own power against the man who had been restraining him for years. In 655, the opposition was overruled. The old empress was removed. Wu Zetian became empress. She had returned from a monastery less than 6 years earlier with no future and no position. Now she stood at the top of the imperial family. Most people would have seen that as the end of the journey. For Wu, it was only the beginning. Most people imagine Wu Zetian seized the power in a single dramatic moment. She didn't. She spent decades building it. By the time people realized how powerful she had become, there was almost nobody left who could stop her. Part of that was circumstance. Her husband, Emperor Gaozong, suffered from chronic illness. As his health declined, more and more decisions landed on Wu's desk. She read the memorials. She made the calls. She sat behind a thin silk screen at the court while the emperor presided in name only. Then, gradually, the screen wasn't even needed. By 664, it had a name, the Two Sages. Emperor and Empress, ruling side by side. China had never seen anything like it. But here's the part that should scare you a little. None of this required her to take anything by force. For years, she simply became indispensable. And a country that depends on you doesn't ask permission to keep depending on you. She had a plan for what came after, a clean one. State power behind an obedient son. Let him wear the crown. She'd keep running the empire from the shadows, the way she always had. Her sons ruined that plan for her, one at a time. Her oldest had already died young under circumstances nobody fully explained. Her second son was a problem. Sharp, well-read, popular with the old families, and openly hostile to his mother's grip on power. Part of that hostility went back further than politics. There had always been a rumor in the palace, one that followed him since birth, that he wasn't even her real son, but her sister's. True or not, it ate at him for years. It gave him one more reason to see Wu not as his mother, but as a threat. So he pushed back in court. He surrounded himself with men who still believed the empire belonged to the Li family, not to her. Then came the part that actually ended him. Soldiers searched his residence and found hidden armor. Proof, they said, of a coup in progress. He was stripped of his title and exiled. Then her men found him and made sure he never came back. Wu Zetian moved to her third son next, after her husband finally died in 683. He lasted 55 days on the throne. 55 days, and then he stood in front of the court and said something so reckless it ended him on the spot. He wanted to hand power to his wife's family. I could give the empire to my father-in-law, he said. And what would be wrong with that? Everything was wrong with that, and Wu made sure he understood it. He was dragged off the throne the same week and shipped into exile. 3 sons down, 1 left, and the 4th one had learned the lesson his brothers paid for. Stay quiet, sign nothing, want nothing. He kept the title of emperor. He never once acted like one. He wasn't allowed to. By now, Wu didn't have a son problem anymore. She had a legitimacy problem. She was already running China, everyone knew it. But she was still ruling in someone else's name. As long as Li Emperor sat on the throne, her authority could always be challenged. There was only one way to solve that problem. Take the throne herself. The problem was no woman had ever sat on that throne, not once in the entire history of China. The entire idea was, by tradition, impossible. So she didn't ask for permission, she built the case. She had monks rewrite Buddhist scripture to declare that a female ruler had been prophesied, that Wu herself was a reincarnated Buddhist deity, destined to rule. Reports of miraculous omens started arriving from across the empire on cue. Strange stones inscribed with messages about a sacred mother, auspicious clouds, perfect harvest. None of this was subtle. All of it worked, because nobody wanted to be the one questioning it out loud. Then came the petitions, tens of thousands of names, officials, monks, foreign envoys, ordinary citizens, all formally requesting that she take the throne. One ambitious official organized a crowd of nearly 1,000 people to deliver exactly that request. Within weeks, he was promoted straight into the inner circle of government. Everyone watching took the hint immediately. Get behind her now, or get left behind permanently. Her own nephews pushed the hardest of all. They had the most to gain. If their aunt became emperor, the family name became royal, and one of them might inherit it all. They helped fabricate the omens. They organized the crowds. They were not loyal to her out of love. They were betting on her. Nobody floats the idea of a female emperor to a woman who hasn't already made it very clear she's listening. But ambition and propaganda don't clear a battlefield. People with armies still had to be dealt with. Some of her late husband's relatives saw exactly what was coming and rose up rather than wait for it. 2 royal princes raised troops, calling for the rescue of the rightful dynasty. Both uprisings were crushed within weeks. What came after was worse than rebellions themselves. Entire branches of the imperial family were hunted down on suspicion alone. The bloodline that once made the throne untouchable was being erased. The old aristocracy didn't escape either. For years, secret police built cases against anyone who looked nostalgic for the old order. Accusation alone was often enough. Eventually, no one in the court spoke against her, because everyone who might have was already dead. By 690, every obstacle that mattered was gone. Her youngest son, the puppet emperor she had placed on the throne years earlier, formally begged her to take it for herself. And she accepted. She was 67 years old, 53 years since she'd first walked into the palace, 39 years since she'd walked out of that monastery. She didn't become Empress Dowager ruling in someone else's name. She became Emperor, outright, in her own name. The only woman to do it in the entire history of China. Most people remember how Wu Zetian took power. Far fewer remember what she did with it. Here's the thing nobody tells you about Wu Zetian. Forget the poison, the purges, the bodies. For decades, she ran one of the most powerful empires on earth. And she ran it well. Start with the exam system. Before her, China's government was a closed club. You didn't get in on talent, you got in on bloodline. Your family had to already be somebody. Wu blew the doors open. Any man, from any background, could sit the exam and test his way into power. She interviewed the top candidates herself. She wanted to see who could actually think, not just who had the right last name. The old families hated it. New people were getting in. People with no connections, no inherited title, just ability. That was the entire point. At the same time, she became one of Buddhism's greatest patrons, sponsoring temples, scholars, and religious projects across the empire. And while Tang China remained a deeply patriarchal society, women under Wu Zetian enjoyed a level of visibility and influence that many later dynasties would gradually roll back. And the empire responded. Population surged, farms produced more. Her armies pushed the border west and held it. She was running a country of tens of millions, and for decades it worked. This is the part that gets buried. Not because it's secret, because somewhere along the way, people decided her story wasn't about any of this. For centuries after her death, the men writing the history books couldn't resist rewriting her instead. The competent ruler despaired. What replaced her was the seductress, a monster, a cautionary tale about what happens when a woman gets too much power. Cheap, lurid stories piled detail on top of detail, each one more scandalous than the last. Most of it invented, none of it close to the woman who'd spent 40 years actually running China. She built an empire that worked, but there was one thing even she, with all her power, couldn't engineer. She had beaten everything, the court, the aristocracy, the ministers, her own sons, the men who built the Tang dynasty from nothing. But there was one problem she couldn't think her way out of. Who comes after her? If she named one of her sons as heir, the dynasty would pass back to the Li family. Her own Zhou dynasty would end with her. Everything she built under her own name would be absorbed back into the Tang. If she named someone from her own family, a nephew, a cousin, the dynasty might survive in name, but it had no roots, no legitimacy. And in Chinese tradition, it was the son who performed the funeral rites, the son who maintained the ancestral shrine. A nephew ruling in her name would never honor her the way a son could. She was trapped. There was no good answer. For years, this question hung over the court. Her nephews lobbied aggressively. Her sons waited quietly. In the end, an old and trusted advisor said something that cut through everything. Your Majesty has never heard of an aunt being worshipped in the ancestral temple by a nephew, but a son will always honor his mother. Wu listened. By then, she was in her 70s. She brought back the son she had once exiled and named her heir. It meant her dynasty would die with her. She knew that. But history wasn't finished with her yet. Then the final blow came from a direction she hadn't fully defended. She fell seriously ill. She was confined to her quarters. Access was restricted to almost everyone. Court officials, ministers, even her own family. The men she had kept closest in her final years were two brothers, her young male favorites, who had grown powerful in the shadows of her illness. They made decisions, they blocked access, they had made enemies. In January of 705, a group of senior ministers moved. They came at night with soldiers. The brothers were killed before dawn. Then the ministers entered Wu's chamber. She was old and thick, sitting up in bed, and she was surrounded. She looked at her son standing among them and said, "So it was you." One of her sons, the very emperor she had removed after just 55 days on the throne 2 decades earlier. He had returned with the support of the court, the army, and the ministers who wanted the Tang dynasty back. Wu was 81 years old. She had no options. She signed the order. 3 days later, the Tang dynasty was restored. Her Zhou dynasty, 15 years, was over. She died later that year. She left one instruction about her burial: no temple name, no grand posthumous title. Bury her as an empress, her husband's empress, not as emperor in her own right. And her tombstone, she had it left blank, just stone. For centuries after her death, many historians focused on her scandals far more than her achievements. Perhaps that was inevitable. After all, China produced countless male rulers. Only one woman ever took the title of emperor. Maybe that's why she left the stone blank. She knew people would argue about her long after she was gone. And they still do. The stone is still blank. Make of her what you will.